Hello and welcome to this week's Midweek message. It's actually my first one of 2023, and that's because, as some of you will know, I spent most of January up in Newcastle supporting our daughter Naomi and her family through some difficult times. It started with an SOS call between Christmas and New Year. Naomi was 39 weeks pregnant, her husband Sandy had flu, and with a lively 2.5-year-old and nursery clothes, she needed help. So up I went, thinking I'd spend a few days with them, come home and then go back when the baby was born. But on New Year's Day, Sandy, our son-in-law, ended up having to have emergency, life-saving abdominal surgery. And suddenly it became clear that I wasn't going to be going anywhere until after the baby was born. Plans were made that should Naomi go into labour while Sandy was still in hospital, he'd be wheeled down from the ward in a bed if necessary, so that he could be there for the birth. But I was also drafted in as an additional birthing partner. Now, in the event, Logan eventually arrived 11 days late, and by this time Sandy was back home, 2.5 weeks post-op, and able to be fully present with and for Naomi during labour. That was just one of the many signs of God's goodness that we saw through these difficult, challenging weeks. And I too had the pleasure and privilege of being there to welcome our new little grandson into the world. But through it all, I began to be aware that God was doing something in me as well. And really this came into focus on that day that Logan was born. We'd just arrived in Newcastle Birthing Centre and in the assessment unit, and my eyes lightened on the intensive care cot that was there on standby should it be needed for any baby being born. And when I saw it, it gave me quite a turn. Some of you will know that I started life as a small premature baby born 7 weeks early after a very long and difficult labour, during which both my mother and I nearly died. I was in intensive care for 5 weeks, and special care in those days was so different to what it is now. My mother wasn't allowed to see me. 10 minutes a week through a window was all she had. So I never heard her voice. I never felt her touch. And though it was no one's fault, this led to all sorts of feelings of rejection, abandonment and insecurity in my life. Issues that I've spent a lot of my adult life working through with the Lord. But for me, one key point in my healing journey came when our daughter Naomi was born. She was 4 weeks early and she spent 10 days in special care. Now, thankfully, she was never seriously ill, but it was just horrible having to leave her in hospital and go home without our baby. But one lovely thing that happened at that time was that my mother came down to look after us as a family, including our lively 2.5-year-old, so that I could go in and out of hospital to be present with and for Naomi and to look after her in a way that my mother just hadn't been allowed to do when I was born. And there was something very healing in that. Now, fast forward 33 years, here was I being invited by Naomi and Sandy into the heart of their home and family, to be present with and for them as they welcomed their son into the world. All the events surrounding Logan's arrival were tough, actually. There was more that I haven't got time to mention, but there was also a lot of beauty in it. Psalm 100 verse 5 says this: "The Lord is good. His love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations." Having eyes to see the goodness of God at work, even in the midst of the tough stuff that's going on, is something that's so important for us in life. So I pray whatever's going on for you, that you will have eyes to see the goodness and love of God following you through these days into the weeks up ahead. May you know God's presence going with you.